I wasn't bad, but I wasn't great. Like I didn't have any stand-up results, but I was like probably always building. There's so many events, like a world championships for a lot of guys, like someone like Gwyn, it's always eluded him. I was worried that it was going to become one of those things where I could never win my home race. Sam and Nico battling for the win was so cool because they're such different riders. Honestly, I wouldn't say I did anything wrong. I just got unlucky with where I came out on the exit. I don't even know what I slipped on, but I just like washed the front wheel. On top of that is how bad the track gets and how they're able to still go faster even though the track gets so much worse.
How much do you change your tire pressure?
Never. My mechanic in 2022 season when I was leading the overall was just like, we're not taking any chances. Like you have the like lead, we're just going to go downhill. And I think since then I just haven't really like gone back. Hey, this corner in practice was already kind of getting blown out. Like remember that. And then by the race, be like, that corner is probably dead. So like either you can commit to it really hard and just think it's going to be there and like really push everything into it, or change your line and be like, you know what, I'm going to slow up and just like avoid that corner altogether.
Okay, Jesse Melamed, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So thank you for coming. In this podcast, we're going to be chatting about your career.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty much from the start of Enduro World Series until now, we're going to talk about the future of Enduro, your plans for what's next, and also bike settings. That's going to be really important.
Mm-hmm.
But first, I wanted to share a couple of important information regarding the podcast. So, Tom, if you're watching this podcast, you probably realize that there is now a new channel. It's called Breaking Down the Line. And everything is going to be on this YouTube channel. The full episode, but also some shorter cuts, some different type of content. The reason why I've done that is because for the YouTube algorithm, it is better to separate the different style of content. And everything is also going to be available on the audio platforms such as Spotify and Apple Podcast a few days after I'll post on YouTube. And the second important thing, Jesse and I have a common sponsor. So this video is brought to you by Ergon Bike. I've been working with Ergon since 2018, and one thing I love about this brand is how much detail and how much effort they put into research and development. This is a great example. That is the SM Enduro seat that I've been using on most of my bikes. As we know, bikes have got longer, they've got more travel, the wheels got bigger, and our seat posts now also have more travel. So seat clearance has been an issue, and Ergon has addressed that by making a shorter rear end, and that really solves the problem. Also, the seat is very comfortable going uphill, but it also gets some good cushion around here for when you go downhill to be able to maneuver the bike using your knees. Now let's jump onto the grips. Those are the GDH grip, my all-time favorite grip. They work super well with or without gloves. Even if it's wet, they grip really well. I love the texture. They've got that ergonomic shape to keep your elbows out and give you the correct position going downhill. I've got the all slick lock on to match the seat. And as always, you can find those products on Jenson USA. So make sure you check out the link down below. Now let's go back to our podcast. Okay, so Jesse, let's start.
Mm-hmm.
So you're from Whistler?
Yeah.
For the funny story, your dad was a mayor of Whistler.
Mm-hmm.
And I was with Johan Barelli in Sedona last week. And we're chatting actually about your dad because we rode a new trail called Hardline,
Mm-hmm.
where the builders used similar technique to what your dad do. Basically puzzled a bunch of huge rock to make some section rideable.
Mm-hmm.
So a little bit of background. You're from Whistler. You've been skiing a ton, mountain biking a lot. Can you tell us a little bit how you first got into racing mountain bikes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, my parents moved to Whistler originally in the 70s, I believe, and they went there for skiing. I think we know that Whistler Blackcomb is one of the best ski resorts in the world. So they moved separately there just to be ski bums, and they met each other and they needed something to do in the summer, so they started riding bikes, and they had me and my brother, and it was just a family thing. We would just ride bikes. We'd go to Moab every spring for probably 13 to 15 years when I was a kid. Like every year we'd skip off school and go ride bikes, and so it was totally like a huge part of my family. And then when I was growing up, I was big into hockey. I thought I was going to be like a hockey star, and then I was too short and never grew. That didn't pan out. And then skiing was like my next big thing, and I just love skiing. We have such an amazing resort, and I would ski with my brother and all my friends, and we were a really good crew, and I just really liked that. That sport, and spending the weekends as skiing powder was amazing. And then I actually blew my ACL in 2011. And recovering from that, I like spent a lot of time in the gym, and I got really fit. And previously I'd been racing cross country as a kid because that's what my family did. And I wasn't bad, but I wasn't great. Like I didn't have any stand up results, but I was like probably always building. And then, like I just rehabbed from that ACL injury, and had really good results that summer. And I was like, oh, that feels good. I was like starting to do better, and I felt like I was kind of coming around. And I think it was the year that was 2011, 2012, like that transition year is when I got noticed by someone. Andreas Hessler at Rocky was like, hey, we're building an enduro team that this new big discipline. And he wanted me to be on the team because he knew like I was a kid that raced in baggy shorts. Like I never wore spandex. I was always about the downhills. So I'd race cross country, but I was in baggies. And I remember like we'd do laps, and like we'd get to the top of a climb, and people would look back and see who was there, and like, oh, it's baggy shorts kid. Like just let him by and let him go on the descents. So I'd always been more keen on the descents, but I do like the fitness and the effort required kind of to do cross country. So enduro for me was just the perfect discipline.
It was a good fit.
Yeah. So it just went naturally. I've been very lucky with the opportunities I've been given. I've just been one of those like right time, right places. And
yeah, because that was, so you say 2011, Enduro World Series like started in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, the right time, right place with Whistler, and already, like I guess arguably the biggest Enduro World Series race has always been Whistler.
Yeah.
It's always been the most important during Crankworks.
Mm-hmm.
But it's pretty interesting coming from skiing, liking the cross-country aspect, but you've never really been into like proper downhill mountain bike until quite recently, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I think what happened when I was a kid is naturally I did do downhill. I rode the bike park a bunch. Like I was sponsored by this shop back in the day, Glacier Shop, and they would give me bikes, and I would crack a frame every year because it was like you ride in this hard. I'd rode like a hardtail, like a Kona Hula, I think.
Okay.
And I'd hit the GLC drop, and I'd break it. So I always rode like the bike park, and I downhilled, but like on a smaller bike.
Yeah. Because
I was so small that downhill bikes were just huge, and they were like so cumbersome that didn't feel like I could ride a bike. So I remember I did our downhill race in 2007, I think, and I had a Rocky Mountain flatline. The thing was like 50 something pounds, and like I didn't
flatline.
Nothing with the bike. It was just me being small on this big bike, and I just didn't enjoy it. I was like, well, I can't like ride this thing. So I just stuck to cross country, and I never got the allure of downhill until recently, when, not that I'm much bigger than I was then, but I think bikes have come a little bit lighter. They become a lot more rideable. And I understand now. I'm like, man, they're like, when you get a downhill bike set up on like a downhill track, it's kind of like, it's an amazing feeling. So
that's gonna bring us to, we'll talk about it towards more the end of the podcast, but that's gonna be interesting to pick your brain on like bike setup, bike setting, especially with what you just mentioned. I think it's gonna be some like really, really good conversation. But so what's your first enduro, I guess your first proper enduro race?
That's a good question. I would say like the first proper enduro race would be the one that I targeted, and I was in Moab. And I think we didn't even know that there was an enduro race happening. It was just one of my family trips, and I was on like I think I was on the Rocky Mountain Element at that point. So it was like 120 mil bike. And I rocked up to this enduro race in Moab and got smoked. But that would have been 2012, I think.
Okay.
I think, yeah.
And then I guess you did the first Enduro World Series.
Not that year actually, because 2012 was when I was put on the Rocky made like a North American enduro team.
Okay.
And so that was my first season on the enduro circuit, but it was just North American stuff. Yep. So I did do Crankworks that year. and then a race in the States, like an EWS. That was like a BME, but an EWS.
Oh, okay.
And then 2013 was my first full year.
Yes, so 2013 was first full year. There was like a stop in
Yeah.
2013 was the first full year.
Well, I didn't do the first full year.
Okay.
So maybe 2014 might have been my first full year.
Sorry, your first full year was 2014, but your first Enduro World Series would have been a North American stop in 2013. I think they had in Colorado.
Yeah.
There's one, I remember riders, because I used to follow Enduro like quite closely. Back in France, I've done some Enduro races and I remember like loving it. It was like really friendly organization, but yet super competitive. Like some of your teammates, actually, I used to race against Alex Cure back in the day, Florian Nicolai, obviously Fabien Barrel, now your team manager, Johan Barelli. So we had those like family style races with some of the biggest name. So I used to follow like really closely. I remember, I think it was Winter Park in Colorado. People really struggling with elevation, which like would not imagine like racing at like such high elevation. But my first memory of racing against you, not that I've done much racing, but was actually in the bike park. I don't know if you remember, but that would have been, I believe, 2014, and you are trying to win a cross-country race, a downhill race, and an enduro race in the same week. So like WORCA, which is a Whistler Cycling mountain bike association, put together like some cross-country racing, some enduro racing in the bike park, and the Whistler Bike Park had those little downhill races. I'm pretty confident you managed to win the three of them.
Yeah, it wasn't my first try, but I think the next year I got, because it's back-to-back. Wednesday night was the Fat Wednesday.
Yeah.
And that was like, this super famous weekly downhill race that like all of the Whistler kids have done. You know, Finn's done it. Even like Kabarik was there. You were like always super fast. And then there's a lot of other
even
guys.
Troy Brosman.
Yeah, Troy Brosman's been
actually
there.
in 2015, he spent some time in Canada and was racing some of them.
Yeah, they're good. So there's that one, and then same thing. Thursday nights were these local XC races that just had all these local hitters that were so fit and so fast, but that you never heard of. And I wanted to win back to back, and it took me until very late, because I grew up racing the cross country ones, and then it was only until I started racing enduro that I realized the Fat Wednesdays would be good training as well. And then I think it was 2014 that I did a back to back double. I don't know if anyone else has done one.
No, I don't think so, because like winning the downhill is one thing, but like the cross country were like brutal. Like some of the ones I've done were like a lap of Whistler Blackcomb, which is 500 meters of elevation, straight up, super steep, onto then like a gnarly downhill. So
the history of the cross country ones were cool too, because that's like the first race I ever won, like the first race I ever finished first. Growing up, you race age categories, and so you never really you might be first in your age category, but like I said, I wasn't actually that good. And then 2011, when I rehabbed my knee that summer, was the first time I did a Luni race. So it's not like these aren't big things. Like these are local races, but competitive. And it was the first time like I was, it's open category. There's the elite men, there's the women, there's kids in there, and like I finished first. I crossed the line first, and I like didn't know what to do. But I was like, wow, that's crazy. That's like a first race I ever won, and like one of the only ones I'd probably ever like cross the line first in like a mass start. So it's just cool history. I think, Whistler has such a great history of racing, and I attribute so much of my success to growing up in Whistler.
Yeah, and me coming from, because the first time I've done one of those races was the first year I came to Whistler, and I'd never done really anything like this. And having the opportunity to do those races like basically weekly for at the time was $2. You had a local business that sponsor with some food at the finish, a local brewery that gives away some beer, and the racing for only $2. Now with inflation, it's $5, which is still very, very affordable. It was a really cool feeling. So cool. Obviously you get on the team, you start doing the full season of Enduro World Series, your result progress, and then your first win 2017 in Whistler at home. So I remember I was pretty special. One of your sponsors had a big party. Race Face, I guess.
It was a long time coming for that one. I feel like, because I've raced Crankworks every year probably preceding that, like not always DWS, but even before it was. And I'd been close a few times before, like I had any right to be winning those races. Like I was still such a kid and I didn't know what I was doing. But I would have some, like, it was my local trails and I know how to ride those and I was having good results, but I would like blow up a wheel or I'd flat or I'd have a huge crash. And so it took me that was 2017, took me 5 years really to have everything come together. And it was just such a relief because even the year prior I got second, and that was a relief because I was like, I finally finished a race as best as I could. And so I was stoked when I got second. I eventually won that. That was just probably the start of our rivalry, but I just remember I got second in 2016 and I was beyond stoked because I was like, I finally put together a result that I knew that I could do. And then to win it the next year, obviously, it was, there's so many events, like a world championships for a lot of guys, like someone like Gwen, it's always eluded him. I was worried that it was going to become one of those things where I could never win my home race. And I'm glad that I did, because now we don't even have a World Cup in Whistler anymore. So
I know.
glad that I got it.
I was like, from the outside and like watching, like Whistler is quite special because obviously there's crankworks happening at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So you got athletes from all over the place, every discipline,
mm-hmm.
from like slopestyle to enduro, like downhill.
Yeah.
And also a ton of public.
Yeah.
You got, obviously it's at home, so you've got your friends, family.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy for them to come and watch, but also you got people from all over the world that get.
Well, and all your sponsors, all your sponsors are in town too. So the pressure was a lot. Like I definitely, I know when I won the first one, I had like a full on, I don't know if it was a panic attack or what, but like the night after I won, I had such a big like relief that I like just woke up in the middle of the night, just like couldn't breathe. And it was a pretty scary thing, but it was like, it just shows how much stress I was under.
Oh yeah, I bet.
Just as soon as it was done, I was just like, my body like couldn't function.
I mean, if you had one race to win, it's this one.
100%.
It's like the biggest one.
Biggest prize purse too. It's pretty good.
Of course, yeah. We'll talk about that a little bit later with like maybe prize purses and stuff like that. So following that, then you go, keep building up and like then you start racking up like wins and stuff.
Well, I think the race after that one, I would argue, is like the best podium I've ever been on. And we went to France after that and I got third behind Nico Brios and Sandhill. And two for me, two of the biggest inspiration in the like Nicolas Brios, because growing up, close by him and him being, 10-time world champion of downhill, and such a different and unique approach as well. At the time, it's extremely precise and like kind of. Well, that was the coolest thing about that race. Like, I mean, I was just there as a, passerby, but Sam and Nico battling for the win was so cool because they're such different riders. Nico is so precise, so calculated, and Sam is just like raw talent and bike control. Like there was these crazy switchbacky trails where like the French should dominate and you mostly do, and Nico's doing his nose picks and like perfect and powering out, and Sam is just foot out, just like, and not even foot out, because the thing with his flat pedals is, he's not actually
really
foot
have
out
to take your foot out.
It's just that you can do it, so he can just corner at the exact limit where he's the fastest and then just stick his foot out. But it was just two completely different styles. And in enduro, it's so cool because, I mean, I don't remember obviously the like actual time between the two, but it was probably like less than 20 seconds. So like 40 minutes of racing and two completely different styles, and they're neck and neck.
And that was in the southeast of France, if I'm correct.
That was Valberg.
Yeah, Valberg. So I actually raced that in like similar stages. I definitely did the stages in the grey dirt where it's like kind of a cannonball. So this is kind of like the birth of enduro. In France. I think the first race down there was like probably 2005 or 6. And I've done it a little bit later, but such a unique race venue because every stage is like completely different from each other. And it was like, and that's one thing I want to chat about in that podcast is like, I mean, the impact of enduro on like the entire industry and different people. We'll talk about what's going on right now with the racing aspect, but this was, pedaling up with your friend and then riding down like some of the coolest stage. And this is that race in particular to me is like the definition of enduro racing, where you just beautiful mountain, you pedal, and there's variety as well. It's not always the same track, just a little bit to the side. This is like completely different. So following that race, then you win, you do many more podiums, win many more. You change team in 2023.
Yeah, 2022 to 2023.
Yeah. And now what's going on with the state of the sport? Because obviously there's been some changes, and you probably know better than anyone else, like what's going on. You've been a top name for the past, 10 years or so. What's going on with the sport?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's people's expectations of where it should be. Like, for me, racing it, not much has really changed. I think that, it's still just like exciting. It's just as hard. I think we still go to places with amazing variety, and we have just sick tracks that we get to race, and we have unreal bikes, and everything like works super well, and it's still hugely competitive. And I think it's just, we were always chasing this. I think we always wanted to be accepted as a discipline on par with cross country and downhill. Like, because I've been there from the beginning, like it's always been this big thing to me. It's like enduro is just, like we said, almost the purest form of mountain biking. It's what we just all do. And we were the EWS. We were never like the World Cup circuit. So it was always weird because we were like, I race on the World Series. I'm not like, I don't get to say I race on the World Cup circuit. It was always kind of different. And we always just strived we always saw the pinnacle of the sport being once we got to like World Cup level or got the same recognition. And I think once we got that, it was kind of like, value of something is what it like can be in the future. And once we hit that and realized that like that actually wasn't necessarily anything big for us, like we already had something so successful and something that worked so well. And then we got to that level, and then it was just like that's the top. And so it's not that we went down, it's just that we like the view of where it could go kind of like ended. And that's what everyone kind of sees, is like they think it's gone downhill, but in my opinion it's not. It's just like maybe we've just reached like how far it can go, which is fine. Like, I don't think we can be a live televised sport, which is what we always thought that we wanted. And I was like, well, if you look back at our races and like the highlights videos and the content that we put out, like some of it it's amazing content. And I think what really drives enduro to be successful is the places that we get to go. So cross country and downhill are both quite limited in the venues that they can go to. Whereas enduro, we are willing and capable to race on so many different kinds of trails and terrain, evidenced by like we go to a place like in Derby, Tasmania, that's a 300-meter hill with mostly machine-built trails, but they've done such an amazing job, and it's so fun and so sweet. Or we can go to Whistler, which is like the best bike park in the world. Or we can go to La Tuile in Italy, that's like these raw, steep trails that are like 20-minute stages. So we can go so many places, and that, I think, is what drove everyone to watch the sport, because it was like they just want to go to that place and ride their bike.
And also, it's in some ways, it's like enduro has always been like relatable.
Yeah.
Like the idea is simple. You ride up with your friends and then you time the downhill. Whoever is the quickest wins. Whereas like downhill, obviously is amazing, but it's super elitist. Not everyone has access to, a hill with enough like speed and elevation that you can make the track worth it. Whereas enduro to me is, you should be able to make any location work. Obviously you always have some locations that works better with more variety and, better trails, but overall you can make it work anywhere because you got the physical aspect and the gravity aspect. And it's obviously a bit of a shame that it's gone the way it is in terms of like...
But that's the thing, is it hasn't really gone anywhere. Like, I would say the only thing that I would criticize is that we're stuck in Europe, which downhill is as well. Well, I guess downhill is North America still, but I think we can get back there. It's just, we are still doing the same format, the same racing, the same bikes, all the same stuff. And I think it's just people have this, because there's no like what's next, they're now just being negative about, well, it's just gotten so much worse. And I kind of refute that. Like, I don't think it has. Like, for me as a racer, there's been some decisions in the past few years that you're like kind of questioning why they did that. But that's going to happen in any discipline. Like, if you look at downhill,
it's happening right now.
It will just like the Warner Brothers transition for downhill was scary. Everyone was like, this is a terrible move. Like downhill's going to be ruined. And like enduro kind of got a big bump because it was like, well, downhill's like ruined now. So like enduro was kind of like the main focus. But now you look at it and it is kind of coming out the other side and it's like, oh, maybe like this transformation is going to work. So I'm just saying that like people's mindsets towards things are a little bit too quick to like jump to conclusion. And for me, it's like, I know the guys that are running the sport and they're doing their best with what they have. And I think that it's kind of on us to be more positive and more open to what they're trying to create. And yeah, like I said, nothing much has changed. Like my training hasn't changed. My like focus on what I want to like set my bike up as for a race. So like to me, that means the sport hasn't really changed.
Yeah,
everything is the same. It's still like the same core of what makes enduro cool. It's just we have to reshape of like, okay, we're probably not going to get live. We're not going to get like a live televised race, which is fine. Like rally car is a huge sport and doesn't have live footage, so that's fine. And we just have to focus on like the content that we can provide, and the racing is still extremely tight. We're doing 30-40 minutes of racing coming down to like seconds.
Yeah.
So it's still exciting, and I think it's just people need to understand that there's just like a transformation. It's just like it'll find its feet again and it'll be good. And it's also coinciding with the industry like in a terrible situation. So
for sure,
it's kind of like a double whammy to the sport.
At the same time, at the amateur level, like the participation is very high. Like Pemberton Enduro, Squamish Enduro sell out within minutes.
Well, and there was just a survey on Pink Bike about like what race you're going to do, and it was like 2-1 to enduro. Like enduro had by far the most.
Enduro is what people actually do, but it's like if you look at downhill, it's a little bit like downhill racing is a little bit supercross. Like it's super elitist. That's what people see on TV, but not many people actually do that.
Yeah.
Whereas enduro moto, because enduro, the name enduro is coming actually from obviously the enduro moto, so it's the idea of like transition and stages. Enduro moto is what most people across the world do.
Yeah. In some shape or another. Like
in some shape.
Most of the time people are just going like here, you go ride your moto, you go on trails and you're doing like hard enduro. Like you're doing hill climbs and you're doing all those like crazy things and you're posting videos about it. Whereas, and you do go to a supercross track, but like less so. And less people around the world will have access to a supercross track.
So once again, like the enduro is like what's accessible to most mountain biker, you know, pedal up with your friend, shred the downhill. And if you have to race, like you're more likely to race that because the sales of enduro bike are far greater than the sales of downhill bike anyway. But once again, the downhill is easily, you can easily create media and live TV with it, whereas enduro is a bit more complicated. Oh, sorry, we got the dog coming close to dinner. But I think the sport and like the racing aspect of enduro is always going to be there. It's more a question of at the professional level. So like for yourself and like for your competitors, like how to get the sport seen. So therefore like sponsors and media like properly want to pay attention and cultivate it. I remember like the first few years of enduro, and obviously partly because it was new, there was a ton of video. I used to follow the video and I did follow the sport much closer because it was new and exciting. Whereas now obviously sport is a little bit older. There's not as much content about it. Do you have any solution on like a way to, I guess, showcase at least some of the racing a little bit better than what's currently done?
Yeah, it's interesting because like I hear people with this criticism and like I would have to go back and like fact check myself. But as far as I remember, like social media was way less of a thing 10 years ago. So I remember we had really good YouTube videos from the organization.
Yeah.
And that was pretty much it. Like we just had a really good highlights package after the race. Now we have a highlights package. We have people following the race on Instagram, like from the UCI team, and kind of doing story updates like throughout the day. You have Jack Moyer, you have Charlie, you have me putting out YouTube videos and more coming as well. Like I know more guys starting their channels. So I would say there's more content there. You just have to kind of go and look for it. I don't even know if you have to go and look for it. Like it's just right there.
Yeah. It's like,
so I think that, people maybe say that the highlights packages aren't as good, and maybe that's true. I know that we used to have that Red Bull series off track with Curtis King, or on track. I don't know which one it was, and that was really good for the sport as well. So if something like that can come back, where like they can dramatize the sport a little bit more, kind of like a Drive to Survive type thing, or the Tour de France version, I think those have done pretty well, and that can like almost. I think maybe there's just a lot more newcomers to the sport, and they just don't even know what enduro is. And like for me, that Drive to Survive fully did what was intended and got me into the sport, because previously I had no idea like pit stops and tire management and all this stuff. I didn't really understand Formula One. I knew the cars, and I was like, yeah, it's the fastest sport, but like I don't know. And then I watched Drive to Survive, and I was like, okay, I was like taught what is so dramatic about the sport and what makes it so great, and that was like, okay, I get it. And so that on track series by Red Bull for enduro, I think did the same thing. It was like, what makes this sport so hard? What makes it so like? Why do you want to follow it? And why do you want to follow this racer or that racer? And I think bringing something like that back would be pretty huge, I think, for us.
Yeah, I mean, once again, like Red Bull does an incredible job at telling stories.
Yeah,
I think if Red Bull was more involved, and for example, you mentioned earlier hard enduro with a moto. Red Bull had a series of hard enduro races. I would love to see Red Bull putting together like a series of racing, of like enduro racing, basically.
Well, I think there's like the opportunity for that, and like I know, because I have been around for a long time, and I know Chris Ball, who like runs it all, and I had a talk with him this winter, and I was like, how do we try to get back to the excitement that we had 10 years ago, or not even, it was probably like 5 years ago, and the goal is to get back to traveling the world like that. I think COVID really messed things up, because a lot of those organizers in these smaller places just kind of went not out of business, but like they just couldn't afford to put on a race anymore. And so I think that's been our biggest hurdle, is like getting over that. And so hopefully those organizers are coming back, and we can start going to these places that downhill and cross country can't. And then I think we start to see like, okay, yes, this is what it makes enduro so cool, is that we can go to Madeira, we can go to Colombia, we can go to Argentina and Chile, and hopefully somewhere in Asia. And I know they've scouted places, and I know that like that is their goal. And talking with him as well, it's like, if that means we have to downsize a bike category to maybe open up the venues more to, it's more physical, but like, I mean, I'm all for it. Like, I just want to race my bike, go to cool places, and ride sweet trails, which
and like
doesn't have to be on a 170 mil bike. Like, I just built up a new 140 mil bike like that, the Spectral, and there's also that new Stumpy 15 or whatever that's like all the rage, and that's 145 mils, and those bikes are so capable. Like, I think that there's a huge potential there to like reignite what like, and bring enduro kind of like back to
to kind of like give limitation to the bike, so therefore like riders and race course organizers have to adapt to make the sport like a bit different.
Yeah, but I think, like you said before, is like the variety is what you like so much about Valberg, and so expand that to a whole season. And that's what enduro has been, is we have rounds that are super flat and physical, and we have rounds that are super steep in tech. And so in between that, you have so many options for having different venues and maybe different bikes. And
that's a really good point, because as a viewer, if all the race courses are very similar from one location to the other, I'm always gonna have the expectation that the same guys or girls are gonna be on the front. Was if one venue is really gravity orientated and the next stop the following week is very physical, I'm gonna be interested to see how the winner of the previous race does on a circuit that's not gonna be suitable for
exactly, because it's all anticipation. It's all the excitement is in like the lead up to the race, but like who's gonna do well. Like Formula One just started 2 weeks ago, and I don't watch full seasons anymore because I find it to get pretty repetitive, but I'm so into it for like that whole lead up, like who is going to be quick. And then so you have one race, and then we had another race just today, and it was who is going to be quick on this course. And so like you're saying, I think that's a super good point of like, we have certain specialists that are like really fit and some that are really tech, So
and same with the condition as well. When you follow downhill, and
we can
it's
race
gonna
in
be a
snow
course
for world
that's
champs, or we can race in sun and dust in the finale.
But for example, with downhill, and you got a race course that's like becomes extremely muddy. Suddenly your favorite for the weekend like kind of change because you have expectation of like, okay, this rider is gonna most likely perform better in the wet, whereas this guy usually does better when it's like dry and very physical. So yeah, I think it would be really interesting. I'll be curious to see like even more variety with like maybe some like street stages because it used to be a thing like in Chile.
weird prologues,
Prologues,
and then in the one in
Colombia.
we won in Spain actually, that was a prologue, and they made that one in Colombia, and that was a stage.
But even sometimes like an entire enduro race just on concrete, just to make it like, I don't know if you remember, I think it was 2000 and I say maybe 2010. They created like I think it was called a cross country.
Oh, the cross country eliminator or whatever.
Cross country eliminator, like 4 people.
Yeah.
I think the first one actually, Brian Lopes, which raced Enduro World Series as well, was obviously has been,
doing
4 cross racer downhill. But he won that opening. It was in Belgium, I believe. I want to say 2010, but it was like a 2-minute, 2-minute track, insanely physical. Well, obviously it's 2 minutes. So essentially like a BMX track mixed with a cross-country track. I'll be curious to see like Enduro having like even more diversity. And if that means like one proper downhill stage, maybe identical to an actual downhill track.
Yeah, we raced Leo Gang's bottom, like the bottom of Leo Gang downhill track 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think that'll make it like...
And same with Crankworks, not a World Cup, but we raced like the top of the Stevie Smith track.
Yeah, I remember that. Before the actual downhill race as well, because the downhill race came in like a year or two later. So what's happening with Enduro for 2025?
Well, I think it's same. I think we have some new venues, which will be really sweet. Get to go back to La Tuile. It's one of the places I mentioned. I think that's an incredible venue. And then we just got announced a new venue in France, and we have World Championships again, which is huge for us. So I think it's like still doing good things. We still go to new places, and we have World Championships now, which I think is a huge excitement. We have more races this year. And I think the biggest struggle is going to be like with, like I said, the industry is we lost a lot of teams just with companies struggling so much. And
companies struggling had to make the choice with downsizing somewhere, and they decided to downsize in Enduro.
Well, I think it's because downhill was making this change of less teams but allowing bigger teams. And so those companies kind of decided, well, okay, we need way more money to fund this big team. And honestly, I'm surprised that I'm really surprised that the teams committed that much to the Warner Brothers idea of these big teams. Like I didn't think they were going to find money to fund these big teams, especially with the industry the way it is. But yeah, so I think an example is Trek that I don't know, they signed more riders, and then in doing so they had to end their enduro team, which is a shame, but I think it's just temporary. Like I think as soon as the industry starts doing well again and these brands start making money again, like you said, these bikes are what brands sell the most of. So it's still like, a downhill team is still a really successful investment because it's like you sell the image of the brand. And, I think we've seen that with a brand like Commensol that has had insane success in the last 5 years, and now you see Commensols everywhere, trail bikes riding the trails.
So because the downhill bike.
So it's not that like they might not be buying downhill bikes, but it does. You watch this bike perform on a downhill track, and you're like, wow, they must make good bikes, and so you're going to buy the trail bike. So I think having both is key. And for me, luckily, Canyon has a downhill bike as well, and a downhill team that's really successful. But I still think that watching us do what we do on our bikes is still going to sell bike.
I totally agree.
Same with you on your social media and your YouTube, and what you do is like we could probably ride a lot of things pretty well, but it doesn't mean that our bikes are bad because we can ride anything. I think we can show that our bikes are really good with how well we can ride them.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, customer buy that category of bike, like 140 to 170, 180 millimeter of travel. So those are the bikes that if you're a mountain biker and you can have only one bike, most likely you're gonna have that type of bike, so you can pedal it. You can ride occasionally bike park when you want to, and the bike's gonna perform well everywhere.
Yeah.
Of course, it's not gonna be as fast as a downhill bike. It's not gonna pedal as well as a cross country bike or down country, but it does it well. And yeah, once again, I think the enduro, well, I guess enduro racing is just like what people enjoy to do. That's what I do all the time. Like I may not race, but I take my time going uphill, and then I have fun and try to push myself going downhill. And so, as we talked a lot about the parallel with moto, what do you think of having the enduro more open to the public? So having the elite like yourself and your competitor racing at the same time, the same course than, you know, essentially intermediate riders.
I mean, they do that already.
But now you have to qualify, right? There's a certain
only to
level.
race pro.
Race
still
pro,
EWS, or I don't know what it's called. It was EWS 100. I don't know what it's called now, but it's still a huge focus. That usually the day that we're practicing, they're racing, so they're a day ahead, and so there's still hundreds of amateurs that are out racing the same tracks that we do.
But because it's not on the same day, therefore it's like a little bit difficult to compare, right?
I think this year it might be because there's no e-bikes, and so I'm not 100% sure because I don't know what they'll end up doing, but I believe that because we used to be all on the same day.
Yes.
They used to start super early, which is great because I got to start super late. And then, they would race. And I think that was great for the sport because we'd have hundreds of guys and girls racing early in the day. They would do their race. They'd be stoked because they're racing the same thing that we are. And then they'd be done drinking beers, hanging out, and come and watch us. And then it was talking about being relatable is like, they just went and raced exactly what we're racing, get to watch us and get to watch our GoPros later that we post on YouTube, and are just blown away at like how fast we can do it. And like, I think that is such a cool thing because for us, it's like, and I don't think that way, but they're like, man, I just can't believe how fast you do that or whatever. And I'm like, I'm just riding my bike.
Yeah.
And so it's just it's so fun, like to have everyone there racing the same race that you did.
Yeah. You can only truly appreciate what someone is doing when you get to see it like in person. And, you know, like skiing, for example, there's a difference between watching a ski video and you see someone doing a super cool line or a drop and then going and skiing the same line and actually standing on top of the drop and seeing it. Same with Rampage.
Same. And I remember like my first example of that was probably the Canadian Open at Crankworks. I don't know what year it was, but I was like at the bottom of the old track and it was like super fast and rough. I remember seeing Troy Brosnan come by and I was like, that's how fast you can go on a bike. Like it blew me away. And I was like, that's crazy.
Yeah. And
this was like early in my career.
On TV, it looks like little steps, but when you're in person, you realize that it's like totally different story.
So I think that I'm pretty sure that is still a priority of Warner Brothers, is to make it like keep enduro the one that anyone can go and do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that would be great. Like, I mean, I follow a lot of Enduro Moto and some of, Red Bull Romaniacs and all those races. One of the challenge that they put to the top racer is that often they start after the amateurs. Or it's like a lap system and the pro go first, but then at the second or third lap, they have to like pass the amateur. And it's like almost part of the challenge, it's part of the culture. It's pretty cool.
Interesting.
You were chatting about, you mentioned downhill racing a few times. We've seen you at Mont Saint-Anne last year. So that was the last World Cup of the season.
Yeah.
You had a crash, broke your elbow. What was the motivation with racing downhill? Was it like something you wanted to do?
Yeah, I've always I've watched World Cups, like downhill World Cups since Freecaster days, early, like over 10 years. I've watched every single race and I've just always been a huge fan, and never did I think that I would ever race one. And then signing with Canyon, they make a downhill bike, they have a downhill team, and I had full opportunity to do one. And I was like, well, I have to take this chance. And so it wasn't easy because I had to get points to be able to qualify. I could have gotten probably a federation jersey, but I wanted to see it seemed like a fun goal to set for myself to see if I could qualify for a World Cup. And so my first race, after coming home from Europe, I came home from a three race, probably 5 week block of enduro racing in Europe, jet lagged. That weekend I had Canadian Open, on the new Stevie Smith track on a downhill bike, on a downhill bike I've never ridden.
Yeah.
never like hadn't set it up, and I just drop into this track, and I was just like, I mean, riding a bike, so I was like, okay, but the features are huge. I'm not a huge like, I didn't grow up racing downhill, and so the features were like a big thing, but I hit them all, and I was like, so that was awesome. And then that was basically my setup race to like get my bike set up properly, because then a couple weeks later we had downhill nationals, and I knew that that's where I could get points. And so then next week was Sun Peaks with downhill nationals, and I podiumed at that one, which was a huge result, and got the points. And then I was able to register for Mont Saint Anne. So it was a perfect like plan and lead up, and everything was good. And then I ruined it by sizing up a bike for Mont Saint Anne, and then
what happened? It's I think it's like the middle section of the track, like the one that's like quite steep.
Well,
like the most enduro section too.
Yeah, it was more like, I think I was third lap, which is funny because for me, in my head, it already feels like I'd spent so much time on that track because I'm used to one lap.
Yeah.
So I had a track walk and I had 2 laps, and I was like, man, I'm like, this is sick. I'm just like, everything's good. And then there was just like, this like kind of loamy fresh section. And then there was a double that you could do like into this corner, into this flat section, that I was like, you want to carry speed out of that. So you want to do this double. And it seemed a bit sketchy because it was like, there wasn't a landing. It was just like you pre-hopped and then you just kind of like downhill biked your way through like a compression landing. And I talked to, I think, Troy or Luca, and I was like, hey, you just do it. Like, hey, you just do it. And I was like, okay. And then I think I from memory, I just jumped it. Honestly, I wouldn't say I did anything wrong. I just got unlucky with where I came out on the exit. I don't even know what I slipped on, but I just like washed the front wheel, and could have been, like I said, I mean, I really, in hindsight, my biggest mistake was just not setting up my bike. Like, I didn't really spend time on my bike. I didn't set it up. I didn't really like know it like the back of my hand, like my enduro bike, where I can do a move like that and know that I can get away with it because I know exactly how my bike responds. So the biggest mistake was riding in my head like I normally do on a bike that I normally don't ride. And so it was nothing. Like, I just washed the front wheel and just fell on my side. And I actually like crashed and I trolley horsed myself. And I was like, oh shit. Like, so I just thought I trolley horsed myself, and it was like pretty painful, but just like limped off. And then I limped off, and I was just like, oh, I can't straighten my arm. Like, that's weird.
Yeah.
And then, but all I did was crash. Like, I just crashed in here. I didn't hit anything, didn't like hear anything, nothing. And then when I got the x-rays, and I'd broken like 3 bones in my elbow, and I was like, okay, well that sucks. And like, I'm a bit like, sure, I'm a bit embarrassed that like I show up to a World Cup and I like crash out third lap and crash, but I'm pretty proud of that. Like, you know, Canadian Open, podium at nationals, get to Mont Saint Anne. Like, that was pretty cool. And so it was like, I just had the opportunity. Like, Canyon was great. And I'm stoked that I've gotten to a point in my career where I could do a downhill World Cup. Like, it was so fun to be a part of it. I've kind of worked my way into the downhill circuit a little bit, because also like racing the enduros, is I've been able to like kind of make my way to downhills to watch. And I've always been trackside. I'm taking videos, and I'm just a huge fan. And so I've met a lot of the guys, and they're all super nice and friendly, and they'll stop on the side of the track, and they'll like kind of like think you're any other fan, and they would say hi to any other fan too, but they would like kind of like recognize, and you're like, oh, like, hey Jesse, how's it going?
Well, because all these guys and girls, they also follow enduro, so they know the enduro, and same like us both ways, right? So that's pretty cool. Like,
so it was fun to be a part of that, and I think it's not the last one I'll do. I think I just need to be smarter, honestly, and actually ride my bike and set it up, and just not get too ahead of myself. I was just end of the season. I was just having a good time. Like, I know, like, I can remember on that run, I'm pretty sure, maybe it was a run before, but like Sven Martin just yelling at me to slow down. But I was just having fun. I didn't think I wasn't trying to go fast. I was like, this is sick. Riding a downhill bike on Mont Saint Anne. The track was unreal. Yeah. And I was just having fun.
Especially in the fall, like you get like nice colors and stuff. So, and it's a mythic track, and it's in Canada.
But again, I think I'm really good at the one practice run, race run, like that transit or that like transformation from just like one practice, watch GoPro, and then race. That's like one of my strengths. Yeah. I think that's what was my downfall.
Well, that's the quality you need in enduro.
Yeah, and for downhill, it's like you have so many days and so many runs, and I think I just was going too quick too. too soon.
In a way, and maybe that's because I grew up like riding some enduro, but I have a similar approach where I can do one lap, and then my second lap is basically my top speed.
Sometimes my first lap is my best, my best run.
Yeah, because often like not having expectation of what's coming, you ride like a little bit more loose and stuff like that. Was when you know what's coming and you know you have to be above the route, and for whatever reason,
corner you have to brake early for that corner. Sometimes when you're blind, you're just like, you don't brake for that corner and you still make it through, and you're like, well, that was sketchy, but really fast.
I think that's something that really impresses me, like with downhill, is how they, the riders like build up, and when you think they're going fast, they're going even faster the next one, and then finals comes like.
And I think that like on top of that is how bad the track gets, and how they're able to still go faster even though the track gets so much worse.
Yeah,
like that to me is where I'm like, I don't know how you do that, but riding a downhill bike, a good downhill bike, kind of made me understand how. I was like, wow, you wouldn't think that, what are they, like 30, 40 more mils of travel than my bike, but they really do open up like a different speed, and like you see this pile of rocks or braking bumps or like rough section, and you're just like, yeah, whatever, just blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, because the way I see it is that you got like your trail bike or enduro bike's got, let's say, 170 millimeter of travel. Downhill bike is 200. But the way I see it is that you can use the first 170 millimeter of travel, kind of similar to an enduro bike almost, to like get your traction, get the comfort. But then you got the extra 30 millimeter of travel is like your safety for like bigger hits.
Yeah.
That, of course, on an enduro race, you'll find like big compression and big hit. But in downhill, because you know the track and the jumps are bigger and the compressions are even bigger, you can, push even further. And that's like takes quite an adjustment to go from one bike to the other in terms of like what the bike is actually capable of doing.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
So talking about bike and setup, with similar size, similar weight. So what are you?
167 centimeters, probably.
Okay, so I'm like essentially 1 inch taller.
69, 70 kg.
And I'm probably like 5 kilos lighter than you. At the Maxis booth a couple of years ago, I remember going on your bike. But like I jumped on your bike around, and I knew you were heavier than me, but I was very surprised by how much softer your bike was compared to mine. So I want to use that time to like talk a little bit, like nerd out about, bike settings, suspension. So geometry. What's your like ideal reach? Without telling us exactly like your numbers on your bike, but like, what do you want your bike to be in terms of reach?
Yeah, I mean, for years I've been around like 440-ish.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's like, I think, and that's good for me because it matches most rear ends that are like 435.
Okay, so chain stays, you like 435.
Yeah, because for enduro you have such tight switchbacks, and you just really want to get the bike around, and that creates a balanced bike. Like, you see a lot of unbalanced people because like they're on an XL bike that's a 480, 500 reach with a 435 rear end. They not all brands like size up their rear ends.
Yeah.
And so I think that for me is a really good balance.
And the reason why most brands don't size up the rear end is it comes down to cost.
Yeah,
because you can essentially make one rear triangle and different front triangle for sizes.
But I mean, having said that, I know that like before I came on the team, Jack Moy was on the team, and he's 6'2" or something,
and he liked
the short rear end because of that reason, just getting the thing around a corner. And I know, because I know they tested it and they settled on that for the bike that I'm riding now.
And because it's very personal preference. Like I used to be on 430 or 435 millimeter chainstay. When I switched to propane, chainstay were longer, 445, and I was a bit worried about it. And to me, like the first ride, it felt a bit weird, but awkwardly, I felt much more confident. So actually, having the longer chainstay, like it matched my riding well, especially because I have a mullet setup. So the rear of the bike is playful anyway.
Yeah.
So it's like it's really like personal. Obviously, if you can adjust it, it's even better. So 435 rear center of the bike, 440 front. But what stem do you run?
40 mil now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because me, I prefer longer reach. So my ideal reach is like basically 455,
Yeah.
but with a 35 millimeter stem.
Yeah, it's interesting because, and what's your head angle?
On an enduro bike, like 64.
Yeah.
Depends, like obviously I run different bikes, but like 64 for like a bike that's comparable to yours, like about 64.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, we're at a pretty close, because I'm actually going to try like a 45 mil stem soon. So like we'll be at a pretty similar reach then.
And that's because you want like more weight on the front, like for cornering?
Yeah, for cornering.
Is...
Yeah, that's what I was asking, because I had a really bad spell of injuries for a few years, and I'm pretty sure it's down to bikes hadn't really caught up yet, and so I was like trying to really slacken my bike out, and so I had a really not really slack bike, but a slack bike that was a pretty short reach with a 35 mil stem, and I was just getting a ton of understeer, and I just kept on washing the front. And so once I sized up to a 40 mil, I feel like that really helped me, where like when I started to wash, I had enough front weight there that I wasn't washing and pushing. I was just washing and able to like hold it and put my foot out and then save myself.
Yeah, because you got
But I do a lot different riding. Like I'm on loose terrain with shitty corners, and I'm going as fast as I possibly can.
Yeah, you're looking for the grip. Whereas me,
you're very precise.
Like, what's the type of riding I do? I know my setup works well for, you know, the steep, gnarly lines, but I know that my setup is not ideal for flat corners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I feel like you can only set up the bike well for one type of riding.
Yeah.
And I mean, even in enduro, it's hard because every stage you do is different. Everywhere you go is kind of different.
Yeah.
But the type of riding I do, like what's important for me is to have a bike that puts me in a lot of confidence when I do the stuff that I judge the most like dangerous, and where I want the biggest like competitive advantage in terms of like bike settings. So for this, I run like, that's why I like a longer bike as well.
It's more stable. It's like you run a longer bike, but you shorten your stem to keep your reach like controllable, and you have a lot of like agility with the bike.
And my front end is really high just because I ride like mostly steep stuff.
Yeah, so
but then what happens when I get to a flat corner, I struggle to put weight on the front.
Well, and that's why I run my stack really high as well. But then I'd keep my stem long or my reach short to keep my weight like over the front wheel.
Yeah, that's interesting about geometry. So at tube angle, what's your enduro?
64 is probably like my ideal. Yeah.
I feel like over the years, like companies were going like trying like the extremes, but it went back to like 60. Same in downhill. I remember brand like we're pushing it, but now I think we found the sweet spot, just like in moto, where like now the geometry like no longer evolves, like it did over the past few years.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've gotten to too slack. I think that, you know, I've ridden like 63.5, and I think for steep stuff like that, again, it gives you so much confidence. Like you can really charge through rough stuff and steep stuff, and it's really good. But for me, like I think that the most crucial thing to set the bike up for is loose flat corners, and that's where I think that how I've set my bike up is like just for that. Whereas if I was just kind of doing more of what you were doing, or just riding for fun, you don't care if you like carry speed around a flat corner. I just want to go like fast down rough stuff or try steep and gnarly lines. I'd probably run a slacker like 63.5.
Yeah, my other bike is slacker than like my enduro bike. So now tires. That's something, because we have same partner, Maxis. You've been on Maxis for a long time, basically
probably my entire career.
Yeah, wasn't the rookie team on Schwalbe at some point?
No, we were on Continental for the first year, 2012 that year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've been on Maxis forever. What's your tire combo?
As a guy, DHR2 pretty much.
Okay.
All the time, unless it gets wet, obviously.
And so obviously you got your tire set up, and you say like on your bike, like your suspension, your pressure, you know, you find a setup that works and you kind of leave it. You just tune like compression, like essentially the damping, so compression and rebound. How about tires? How much do you change your tire pressure?
Never.
Never?
Yeah, I mean, again, it depends on the tire. Like if I use like a High Roller 3 or something, I'm probably using that because it's wet, I might go a PSI lower. But I run 1920 pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Downhill casing, I assume?
Downhill casings.
Is it just for the reliability, or you like the feel of the downhill casing more?
Both. Yeah, if I'm like, I ride pretty committed, and so and again, because we have such diverse tracks, like sometimes we're riding bike park and you have to shop a corner.
Yeah.
And the downhill casing is just, it's just so sure. Like you just have so much to push against. But that being said, I have asked for and should be getting like double down tires this week to just try again. Just because if we go a little bit more physical again, I want to get that like suppleness back of a double down and lose some weight. So
yeah, I mean, depending how like enduro like turns, like if you go to a location, let's say you get a stage, like I just come back from Sedona, and Johan was mentioning that he trains, that was like in 2019. Some of the stages were getting like really physical, so he trained on high line, which is like, you know, there's some really gnarly section of trail where you go really fast, where you want a downhill casing just for the reliability, like without even mentioning performance, you want the downhill casing for the reliability.
Yeah.
But before getting there, you have a section of like flat pedaling where having a double on tire will definitely help you. So it will be interesting to hear your feedback.
And then they have like I don't know if they have a new casing that they've been working on, and I raced one actually a year and a half ago now. Won the race on it, and that thing like blew my mind. Yeah. So they've been like really fine tuning it, but once that comes out, like that'll be my tire for sure.
I've been on it as well.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So, do you run inserts?
No.
You used to run inserts.
Used to, yeah. And then
what was the reasoning? Obviously, so inserts, they provide support, extra reliability to protect the rim. But what was your reasoning to move away from the insert?
We got on different wheels basically, and they just had a little bit more give to them. And so what I was liking about the Cush, I was on Cush Core at the time. What I was liking about that was I could run softer pressures and still have that stability in corners. And then now we've kind of built that with our wheels. So we have like more forgiveness, and then with the downhill casing still have stability in the corners. And so that's kind of like the best. And then I would probably run inserts if it wasn't for weight. Like it's just, you're just adding a bunch of weight to your bike, which again for us is, you know, my
especially on the wheels.
Yeah, exactly. So it's, if I can get away with it, which I have, knock on wood, it's been pretty good. So yeah.
Similar reasoning for me.
And I remember like Fab was that way. He was like, you know, because you can kind of go down this line of setting your bike up for durability and like making through the weekend and just like safety. And then he was like, well, do you want to win a race or not? It's like you gotta push the limits, and like you gotta like run close to the edge to win that race. And if you don't win, you don't win. But like, what are you trying to do? Just finish the race, or are you trying to win the race? And I was like, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I think I'm on a similar boat. So I've never really run like any insert. Being light, so in kilos, I'm 64 kilo, which is 142 pounds. Yeah. I feel like really confident with my knowledge of the Maxxis tires. So I know that the Exo tire, for me, Exo Plus, it works for like really light trail riding cross country, which I don't do much. But if I go on a big pedal and pedal efficiency is important, I go for that. So double down for me works well basically everywhere, except if there is like huge support needed in corners. But anything that's slow tech, it works. But I know that in terms of reliability, obviously it's lighter than a downhill casing. I can't allow myself to make mistake like I would on downhill casing tire. But it pedals well. And, for the most part, it's good. I also know that I have to go up in tire pressure. Yeah. Depending on the terrain. In Squamish, we don't really have that many sharp rocks. The terrain here, like even though it's gnarly, we got, big compression and rocks and roots. Most of our rocks and roots are not super sharp. But when you go somewhere like Moab, the rocks are like crazy sharp. Yeah. Even though you don't ride any faster, those compression are like pretty bad for the wheels and for the tires. So I'm very mindful of what I use, but when I want performance and reliability, like it's impossible to beat a downhill casing.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree, but like I think double down gets you pretty far. And I think the only reason, like I used to run double down the front all the time and then downhill in the back, and sometimes double downs. But my mechanic in 2022 season when I was leading the overall was just like, we're not taking any chances. Like you have the like lead, we're just going to go downhill. And I think since then, I just haven't really like gone back. Yeah.
Yeah. The support is like a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like depending on the stage, like if you've got, some like super committed corners where you really have to hit the corner a certain way, which is, enduro, it could be any corner, especially when you don't know exactly what's coming and you might not be super precise.
Mm-hmm.
I find the double down, especially at the double down compared to the non-casing tire, like precision.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've never had the tire come off the wheel actually.
Yeah, no.
But the precision and the confidence it gives me to feel like, I make a corner and the bike shoots exactly the way I want is to me, really key. But obviously it's heavier.
Yeah.
So when you get to pedal.
Yeah. I think I've just like accepted how heavy my bike is and I just deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so earlier, like before we actually recorded the podcast, you mentioned a little bit your suspension, how it's really important for you to find a setup for the leading season.
Yeah, like you said, I don't really, I'd like to set it up and I'm always, it depends, like it's so much dependent on like my mindset and like where I'm at and how I'm doing, but I try to I spend a lot of time, like now is pretty much key time setting my bike up, getting really comfortable and knowing that it's just going to work at every race that I do. And I rarely change pressures, like pretty much run the same sag all season. And then I'll just kind of change clickers and maybe tunes. And if I have to adjust pressures because of that, I would, but like I try not to change too much, too drastically because I'm so used to basically my geometry. And so as soon as you start changing your suspension, you're changing your geometry. Yeah. I try not to change that too much. And yeah, you said my bike is really soft. And I think that comes down to... I was
surprised, yeah.
Yeah, it's just, we don't know what we're riding. Like, so things come at you fast and you might be offline. And I really just want my suspension to be taking everything out where like, I'm going over like the edge of the track or boulders or whatever. And like, if I have a really stiff suspension, it's just going to buck me and I'm not going to be able to like hold on and it's going to take a lot of energy. So for me, it's like, it's not the fastest in like, it's not downhill fast, but it's enduro fast because over the course of a stage, I'll be faster because I'm not fatiguing as much and I'm getting away with whatever, missing a braking point and running wide and going over all these like rocks or whatever is like shrapnels in the trail. So like overall, I'm able to go faster because I'm able to like maintain my speed a lot better.
And one of the big thing is obviously like traction.
Yeah.
Like your grip is definitely better on a softer setup than it is on a stiffer setup. Fatigue for like your hands, like feet, because when you race top of the world, like I guess like your feet hurts like from just like all those like little vibration. But what shocked me when I jumped on your bike is my reasoning is to save energy. Obviously, I want a softer bike on like the small bumps, but when there's big compression and your shoulders are tired, your lower back is tired, you don't have much strength, having a stiffer bike means that to me, the bike is gonna like take a lot more of the impact than myself. Because if your bike is soft and you are deep into the travel, you hit the bottom of the suspension, which is like your bottom out or close to your bottom out. And then that means your body has to take the impact. So that was kind of my reasoning, what like surprised me.
I think we just have less of that. Like once you go to Europe, you just have a lot more like raw trails that are just rough and technical and less big impressions. You're getting like the kind of the bike parky stuff, but not enough to set your bike up for that. But I mean, having said that, I'm working on getting flight attendant on my bike for this year for that reason. For like, I want flight attendant so that when it gets like into a flow track or the bike park, I can click it into like a stiffer mode.
Stiffer mode, yeah.
I think that's a huge advantage.
Yeah, because some of the stages you race, like even, I mean, the one that I know well is the one around the bike park. When you run a stage in the bike park and then you run microclimate or, it's totally different type of riding. The dirt's different. The frequency between the impact, like the roots, the rocks, everything is different. Yeah. So it would be like quite difficult to ride your bike at 100% on one stage and then the next stage.
It's so hard to set your bike up, which is why you just set it up for like a general, like I know exactly how my bike's going to react. And then it's all up to me to ride it like as fast as I can on any given stage. And I mean, I do really like RockShox has only 5 clicks of high-speed compression on the front and the back, and I really like those because like those make a huge difference, and I will stage to stage like change that depending on what the stage looks like.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you if from one stage to one stage you did some adjustments.
Yeah, just like it's almost as much for the mental as it is for the game, but it definitely they're pretty useful. And Richie's actually like a huge. He does it more than anyone. Every single stage, he'll be watching us.
I mean, I do it like so. I mean, suspension. You got your air spring, your hydraulic with your compression, your rebound. I do change a lot my compression, so I've got a setting, that works for everything. But if I'm gonna push myself to a certain line and there's a drop, and I know there's a huge impact, I'm just gonna crank the high speed and low speed to get a bit more support, just to get that extra confidence. And it's like, my bike is gonna react better like this than if it was like, the usual setup that I run. That's interesting. Another partner we have in common, Ergon. Yeah. So grips and seat, we run the same grip. Can you walk us through?
Yeah, the GDH team. It's actually the first grip that I've run that's like sponsor correct. So like that's just to say that it's like a really good grip.
Yeah, they made a really good job.
Yeah. And they have a bunch of different rubber compounds, and I think I've selected like the one that I really like. But it's just the things like, I mean, I put them on my bike in the winter to kind of like wear them in a little bit for the season, but they last so long that like I feel like I never have to change grips unless I've like crashed on them and ripped them apart. But they last a long time. Like they're super grippy. They work in the wet. They work without gloves, with gloves.
Yeah,
I feel
that's a question that comes back a lot.
At home, I don't always wear gloves. I just like whatever. But for racing, I wear gloves, and so they work with both. And if it's wet, I have no issues. If it's dry, I have no issues. And I feel like they're just a really like well made grip.
And I like the I guess the bar plug or the end plug, whatever it's called, because you crash, you can just replace that, and you don't tear and break the entire grip.
The grip,
I used to like when the grip was just like ending at the bar,
right?
And you didn't have an end plug. I used to like the feeling, but then a few years ago, like I changed back to really enjoying like having that support, and I feel exactly where my hand is on the grip, and just being able to like replace the part if you do crash, because obviously if it's like the entire grip, chances are the grip may break, and if you're in holiday somewhere and you have to find new grips, always a thing.
For sure.
Your seat, what do you use?
It's like the SR Men team, so it's like I think it's carbon rails. I mean, just for weight, really. And it's strong. Maybe I've broken one, but I can't remember. Just had a nicer shape, like, and I ride a lot of like cross country and road and stuff like that, and so
you like consistency.
Maybe that's why. I had one, and I realized, it like suits my sit bones a little bit better. And for us, like we're doing 6-hour days, like we're sitting down and pedaling a lot. And so that one I just found was super good saddle.
And size small, medium, I assume.
Yeah.
It's the same size small, medium, but I run the SM Enduro, which is the Enduro seat. I don't pedal as much as you, but obviously I do pedal up, so having a seat that's comfortable is key. But what I like with the SM Enduro is that the rear is like fairly short, and gives me like, because you don't realize, but when you ride downhill, you still use the seat a lot with your knees.
Yeah.
Like whenever you jump, and it's quite comfortable. So when I jump and move the bike in the air, or I kind of track stand in front of a feature, like I like to have that extra comfort around the knee. Even though I've got knee pads, it's still nice. But on my road bike and my gravel bikes that I don't use much, I use actually the specific seats that Ergon.
I think the SR is like it's the same length, same width as the Enduro. The only thing is it like where you sit, it just rolls off a bit. Yeah. So maybe for me, or for whatever reason, for my legs, it just works a little bit better.
And like seat more than anything else is very personal preference. And so it's like always a great way to like. I mean, you need to try and see what works. Like my dad and I are exactly the same size. Yeah. And so when I go on his road bike, I don't have to move anything. But he used to like a certain type of seat that just I hate it. Like super flat, no cushion, nothing. And I just really didn't like it. But it's funny because everything is the same, except the seat. Like I would want to use my seat on his bike.
Yeah, interesting.
And we're pretty similar size, and we're same size. And I see I've got a disc. It's I've got a wheel, so I've got a disc. Pretty standard. But what disc size do you use?
200s.
200 front and rear.
Yeah.
What do you think of the 220?
I think there's potential. I've wanted to like swap my brake pad material and go to a bigger size, but the bigger size, like, I don't know, clearance issues, warping issues. I don't know if those are things, but like that's just what I think of.
Yeah.
And I mean, the brakes that I have currently are just like such just bomber. So I haven't really had to think about changing anything because they just work. Like that's not really something that I feel like I have to dial in that much.
To play with, yeah. I'm a bit the same. I have the opportunity to run 220, and I'm like the 203 have like way enough power.
Yeah.
They don't overheat with the type of riding I do. They're consistent. I love them. I don't really want to change something that works so well for me.
Yeah. Because getting used to brakes is tough. So if you change anything on your brake,
anything on the bike, you get used to something. Sometimes it's like there might be another product that's from the same brand, like just a different model that might work. Some stuff is easy to change, like a seat. A seat, you put it on, it works for you. It's great. It doesn't. But like stuff that like takes a lot of time to get used to, it's always a bit more tricky.
Yeah.
One thing that's changed a lot over the years are cranks. Crank, like the length of your cranks. What do you run?
165.
165. Have you ever tried smaller?
No, I haven't. I don't know if they make smaller, but I'm pretty happy. Like I remember when I went from 170 to 165, and I was like not sure, but then I ended up settling on 165, and like I don't know, because we have a lot of accelerations, and so you want that like high torque, and so a longer crank kind of helps with that. Whereas I think as far as I know, like the roadies are going really short and cross country guys are going short because they want to keep I think it's just to keep their cadence up and keep like less movement of their feet don't have to travel as far, so then their knees don't have to travel as far and their hips don't have to travel as far. And
it's because 175 used to be the norm.
Yeah.
Like, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I've always had 175, and then I remember at the time I had a specialized demo. So that would have been 2010.
Yeah.
And that's the first time I remember like shorter cranks being introduced, specifically because that bike at the time, the bottom bracket was so low at the time.
Yeah.
That, you had to run short, and that was with the influence of Sam Hill.
Yeah.
And I remember like, I didn't like how to pedal it.
Yeah.
And when I came to Whistler at that Giant Glory and I passed my order, and I actually went up because stock the bike was coming with 165 and I wanted my 170. And then I ran 170 for like a long time when no one really did anymore. Like everyone was 165 on the e-bike, but I wanted the extra leverage. I felt like I was not like a super strong pedaler. So having like longer cranks, I thought would help me. And now since like a year or two, I'm 165 on my on my trail bikes.
Yeah.
One more thing I want to ask you is some things that I know the answer, but can you tell us your wheel size and why? Actually, we should have started by that because it's probably the most important.
Yeah, 29er, just for like rolling speed.
For rolling speed.
Yeah, I think like I don't ever have any issues with like I do get the tire buzz on my ass, but like not enough to really deter me from doing it.
Okay. Yeah. So you'd rather maybe lose like a little bit of time or confidence on like.
But I don't.
You don't.
No. Like like I said, it doesn't happen enough, and like I haven't ridden many mullets, but like I don't really struggle down steep stuff or anything like that on the 29er, so I'm like pretty happy with it.
Yeah, which is
I think my riding style is pretty like upright and like
on the front. Yeah, and that's interesting. I couldn't picture myself riding a 29er aggressively down steep stuff.
Interesting.
I love my 29er, like
but I might not be like attacking steep stuff as fast as you. Like you do a lot of content on that where like, I guess I'm just picturing like you're I don't know, even like the stuff you've been posting in Sedona, like that stuff, you probably want more space back there so that like that you're gonna be fine.
I have a video of that where even with the mullet I got bucked pretty hard. So with the 29er I would have front flipped the entire thing. Like this, well, obviously this is like pretty extreme, but like even riding down like an enduro stage, something like Angry Midgets, like here in Squamish, there's nothing like steep or hard enough that I feel like a 29er will handicap me. But anything such as on Whistler, like microclimate,
no, 29 is so good on that.
Yeah, it's like
a moto track. It's just like,
but some section of the track, like I feel like I squat really deep on my bike. I really, and I will feel like the 29er will handicap me. That's obviously like personal, because some of the riders that are taller in Enduro World Series are still like mullet. So it's very like,
there's a few. I wouldn't say there's too many, but I think everyone always tries it and they like the maneuverability
because they're fun.
And then I think they realize how much speed they lose. So, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I can see that. Yeah. So we just mentioned Angry Midget. What's like your top 3 trails that you can find on Trail Forks here in Squamish? That you want.
Big caveat to find on Trail Forks. I would say Single Track Mind. Love that trail.
Wait, Single Track Mind.
It's in Valley Cliff.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
It's on Trail Forks. What else is on Trail Forks? They've done a lot of work to Riggs and Zen because we've raced it like so many years.
Yeah.
And that for me, like, is a great training trail, and it's just like nice viewpoint at the top and then just a full on trail, like top to bottom.
Carry speed. There's a rock garden in the middle.
Yeah. And then
how about Angry Midget?
Yeah, I mean, that's like one of my go-to trails for sure. Like just for testing, it's so good.
Yeah.
And it never really gets old. And they've also done some really good work on that one as well. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot. Like it's hard to pick. I feel like I try to ride everything.
Yeah, but I guess I mean you need to ride variety here because wherever you're gonna race, like every trail is so different.
Do they put FTP on Trail Forks? I think it's on Trail Forks.
I don't know.
I think that was included into the. I really like that trail too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to. I haven't ridden it in a while, so I go check it out. Obviously, you've been like a leader in enduro for the past 10, 12 years. What are like some key tips that you have for people to be faster on their bike? Tips that you can practice on your bike, not gym tips.
Yeah, I mean, consistency with what you ride. Like I spend a lot of time riding the same trails to practice like basically my technique. Like you can hike things, you can do the cone drills, you can do that kind of stuff, which like I do think is great, but I like the real world example where I'll ride a trail a lot and just know like this corner is really tough. Like how am I going to try it today? And like, how am I going to kind of do it better? And so like, I remember when I was a kid, that's what I would do. Like I didn't have any coaching and all I would do was ride my bike a ton. And I know I just had these trails like by my house, and every time I'd go riding, there was like this one section, it was a 20-second piece of trail with a shitty corner at the bottom. And I remember like every time I did it, because every time I went riding, I'd ride this trail and I would just focus on that corner at the bottom. Like I'm going to go faster. I'm going to hit it faster. And so that to me, I think is pretty important, is like find a trail or a section or something where there's a bad corner, there's something that you're like not really great at, and you just repeat it and just try to get it better and better. And like hiking it, great, that's like the best way you could do it, but that does require a lot of like commitment, whereas just like riding it, making sure it's like part of your loop every day. I have a new like favorite exit of my riding now where like has a bunch of like tough corners, and I'm like every day I'm just going to go and I'm going to do that. I'm just going to like practice my cornering technique.
Progress and chill out.
And even it doesn't have to be corners. It can be like a weird, awkward, like up and over thing or anything to practice a skill set where you just get really comfortable at it. Yeah, I think repetition just to practice. So like, if that's cone drills or if that's just riding the same trail over and over again, I think is pretty important. I mean, and there's so many different things. Like if we're talking to get better at enduro racing, I think it's pretty huge, like we talked about, to be able to ride a trail on first sight well and learn how you learn a trail. Like, so for me, I just really like to find the flow of a trail. Like it's almost like you find the feeling of how this trail is going to go for the rest of it, and I try to almost ride at like maximum pace. And then if I make a mistake on something, I'm like, okay, remember that, maybe hike it, maybe do something. But
because you can only remember so much, especially when you have to learn like
and I would
6-7
say
stages.
like I was gonna say use a GoPro or any action cam, whatever. I'm not sponsored by GoPro, so I think you are, but that is a pretty big thing if you're racing. Like I could not do it without it.
Tool,
yeah. But I do just think that like figure out how to practice a trail. Like go ride a trail for the first time and like see how fast you can do it and see where your limitations are. Like you gotta look ahead, you gotta look up, and you gotta get really good at reading trails. And like I think that's a huge part of enduro, because even if you practiced it, the trail changes so much. Because, well, for me, because it's like I'm one of the last ones down, it's like I'll practice it and then you have no idea. Hundreds of people could have practiced it and then hundreds will have raced it before you. And so you have to be really good at looking ahead, reading the terrain and anticipating like what you're gonna have to do, and know that like, hey, this corner in practice was already kind of getting blown out. Like, remember that, and then by the race, be like, that corner is probably dead. So like, either you can commit to it really hard and just think it's gonna be there and like really push everything into it, or change your line and be like, you know what, I'm going to slow up and just like avoid that corner altogether.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Gym tips? Any things that people can practice? Consistency.
Yeah. I think gym is like pretty. I thought for a while because I don't know, I just like didn't think I needed it, and then I just was getting all those injuries, and I think it's like huge for injury prevention. I think it makes you a stronger rider. It increases, like I know, like if I do a strength session and I go into sprints, like I feel so much stronger on the bike, and then even just like turning my bike it's so much better.
Yeah.
And then fatigue resistance. So like I wouldn't say there's much specific. Like everyone knows it's like deadlift, squat, bench press, and pull-ups or something. Like if you 4 exercises, you just got to hit the whole body, you know, like
Talking about bench press, you can do push-ups, right?
Push-ups, yeah.
One thing is really important, obviously, like anytime you take a big compression, but that made me, that reminded me that I forgot to ask you something I'm actually very curious about, is, because I've been experimenting with it lately, is bar length.
Mm-hmm.
What do you run your bars cut at?
720.
720?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I surprise people when I tell them I'm at 745, but lately I've been going down 738. So just like slightly, it's only like, 3mm each side essentially. And it made a big difference with how quick you can maneuver the bike, I find.
Well, I just think our bikes are so stable now. Like your big handlebar makes you stable, makes like steering inputs like less, and you don't get bucked around as much. But we have really capable bikes with really good suspension, long wheelbase in your case. And I just like, that wasn't what I was lacking, And so for me, I'm a small guy. Like I have a pretty like short wingspan, and I would look at other guys riding, and like they had so much space to move their bike like this and turn it and lean it over. And I was like, I looked at me and I was like, why can't I do that? And then I like was just calculating the ratio of like people's height to their bar width. And I was like, I'm running like bars way too wide for me.
Yeah, it's just a matter of ratio.
Jack, again, like, I mean, I study a lot of what my competitors do, and like he rides 760 or maybe even 750, and he's 6'2". So like that's crazy. And Richie is also a tall guy, and he's running 750s as well. So like for me, being on 720 isn't actually, it's the same width that they're running. I'm just smaller.
Yeah. And isn't, like, I don't know if you know that, but Troy Grossman, isn't he at 735?
No, I think he runs his pretty wide, actually.
Okay.
He runs like a pretty big, stable setup for sure, and it just like rides it really well.
Yeah. So I was like, I've got that new bike that's Spin Drift, so it's 180 travel, but it's the longest bike I own in terms of reach.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, I felt like I needed to run shorter bars, maybe to make up the reach being longer.
That's what I did back on my previous brand. Like I was running the smallest bike I could, and it was still really long for me. And so I thought, like, if you pull your bars wide like this, you bring yourself forward. Yeah. So your bike basically, like, you have no ability to like move your arms. So like I went as short as I could, because then you bring them this way and you're able to come back, and you have way more like reach to like consume with your arms.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, because I do a lot of comparison on my moto. So on my moto, I love to run 35mm rise bar because they feel like my mountain bike setup. But typically your moto bars, people don't really cut them nearly as much as mountain biking. But it's funny because on my mountain bike, I run the bar, so my hand at the very end on the bar. But on my moto, I run it as far as inside as possible.
Yeah.
But then I ended up measuring the actual distance where my hands stop, and it's like pretty similar to my mountain bike, but it doesn't feel wide. And I realize it's because the reach on the moto is quite shorter than a mountain bike. You've got like a much shorter reach.
Yeah.
And I think that was the reason why it felt, essentially like narrower. So yeah, I've been playing with that, and actually I think I'm pretty sold on 735 to 740.
Yeah, it's just tough now because no one makes bars that narrow.
Well, yeah, well, for a different thing, but yeah, I'll have a chat about that because there's something actually coming for that. So
yeah,
by the time the podcast,
I've heard the same. I've heard the same one, but luckily, like Canyon has a great in-house components. Like that, I run their stem and their bar, and
so they can do kind of whatever for.
Not even that, but their bar, like most bars, wouldn't let me cut to 720 because of where you clamp your stuff.
That's true. Yeah.
But these bars that I'm on, the engineer said I could, so I was like, sweet. So
yeah.
Again, like I've always run different like aftermarket handlebars to my sponsors, and I just run the straight Canyon setup, which is like pretty sweet that a brand as big as Canyon makes a handlebar and stem that are like as competitive as anything else. So it's like pretty handy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I think we covered everything. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
No, I think we're good. It's a good chat. Hopefully everyone enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, like leave them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer. And I don't know. We'll have to get up for a ride sometime.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah. We'll go on the e-bike so I can keep up on the uphill because I saw you doing your intervals on the rain today, and sounds like your fitness is on it, obviously.
Hope so.
If you enjoyed the video, please make sure you subscribe. You'll find that podcast in a few days on Spotify and Apple Music. As always, you want to support, check out the links down below. Thanks for watching.
Sweet.
Wow, that couch is so uncomfortable.
Yeah, I was losing feeling in my leg there. Oh yeah.